few weeks ago, we saw a surprise in the Brexit vote results. Results showed that most polls got it wrong, but we did realize that social media analytics did get close to the mark by tracking sentiments and support voiced on Twitter. So what are the advantages of using social media intelligence when it comes to our own local elections, of course, which we kick off on the 3rd of August? To help us understand this, I'm joined now by Melanie Malherbe. She is the head of client engagement at Brands Eye, and she joins us now for our social media analysis and insider research. It was very interesting, Melanie, thank you for being here. When we spoke to JP before Brexit, and he did say that, social media was actually indicating that a Brexit would happen. And David and I were on the show that evening where it was, no. All the analysts are saying that this is not going to happen. And then we woke up to the news that we were in a Brexit world and now in a post-Brexit world. Mm-hmm. What are the advantages of actually using social media to track sentiment, and why is it that it actually does get close to the mark?
So I think what happens with polling is it happens quite often a long time before the actual elections come along. And people get phoned and they get asked who you're going to be voting for. And I remember the days when asking someone who they're going to vote for kind of felt in the same realm as asking a woman her age or her weight. You didn't actually talk about it. So people, when they get put on the spot for that, they won't necessarily either answer or maybe answer incorrectly. Where social media kind of puts it in their hands whether they want to talk or not. And people, when they feel they want to talk about it, they do. It's also very real time. So you can kind of see the shifts as it comes closer to the elections. So that's the main reason I think it makes a difference and is different to the polls.
There's always the criticism, though, that the social media community is such a small sample of the broader community, and surely it's maybe just a representation of young people and what they're thinking, and young people are not the sum total of the population. Sure. And yet we seem to still get it wrong, and maybe precisely because of that assumption.
Yeah, I think countries like South Africa, that is definitely something to consider. A lot of this, the surveys that come out say when we look at the data that's coming from social media, you should almost accept that it's only 50% of the population's input.
Right.
But still, it's giving us something that we've never had. It's giving us the input from people, like I said, wanting to talk. And whether it's young or old, they're still talking about it.
And people being a very key word from the data that's come out this week. Just walk us through the key phrases and themes that came out of the data this week.
Sure. So, I mean, as you can see there, the very big word people is the most often used word in the last week when we were listening to election-specific and party-specific conversation. And it's kind of a weird thing to see that. But when you start delving into it, you actually realize that people are using it in the sense that they're bringing race into the game. So they're actually using the word not just on its own, they're using it as white people or black people. So true to South Africa, I guess, it's just showing how race is being brought into the mix.
Do we make an assumption then that perhaps one of the big points around which this election will be fought is actually around race relations and, of course, people being at the very center of that?
Yeah, definitely. If you look at what the people are saying when they use these words like black and white, it specifically refers to how the parties treat people or deal with people or their policies. So if you look at the word black, for instance, over 40% of the conversation was around how the DA is perceived to be a white party with anti-black policies almost. And then some of the other conversation where the word black is used refers to where they're asking the governing parties, why are black people still the poorest? You know, what's going wrong here? Where you look at the word, where the word white is used, specifically this week, I think last week the DA, people were quite negative about them using Nelson Mandela in their advert. This week,
and that was a big conversation because even the Mandela family at some point got into the ring and had their voice in it.
Yeah, the thing though is this week it shifted from the DA doing that to the white people within the DA doing that.
Ah, see.
So they're now bringing race and they're kind of stepping away from the party here. So.
And these are some of the tweets exactly to that theme and picking up on around that conversation. And of course, the minister, Fikile Mbalula, never far from the Twitter sphere.
Never.
So I also wanted just to, you know, talk about the prominence of the parties that we are seeing. When we are seeing the race proxy being introduced, it seems as if it's centered around the ANC versus the DA. Is that because the other contending parties haven't really used race as perhaps, you know, their key fighting point that they're taking to these elections?
Well, I can't speak for what they're using as their key fighting points. It's also just shown, and you'll see in some of this, the data coming up, that there's just not that much conversation about the other parties. There's just more conversation around the DA and the ANC. But as you saw there, a lot of the racial conversation is pretty much around the DA.
And do we get any specific picture from a geographical perspective in terms of where these conversations, or the density of the conversations are coming from?
Yes, definitely. We looked at some of the highly contested municipalities as such, and what you're looking at there is the number of people actually speaking. So it's not volume, it's the number of people speaking and whether they are being positive or negative towards those parties. So you can see there, ANC and DA in the Joburg area, both of them are being talked about often and almost similar in terms of the sentiment breakdown.
And that's negativity, right, what we are seeing there? Yes,
so people being negative. If you look at the EFF, very little conversation, but the conversation that's there is actually quite positive in the Joburg area.
And then in terms of some of the municipalities, can we get data that goes, you know, even as deep as some of those contested areas to get a sense of what the conversations are there? Yeah,
definitely. If people mention that, you know, in their tweets or in their posts, you can definitely get that granular. So we've moved on here to the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. A lot of conversation around the ANC there and a lot of negative conversation around the ANC going on
and
there.
And Tshwane is, I mean, we had the big protest, right? And everybody was saying, you know, the capital city is on fire. But even post the protest, the conversation still seems to have stayed with Tshwane. And just like the political oversight on that has been quite intense still.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the remnants of Tshwane unrest, definitely. But we've only looked, this is data for the past week, so it could also just be the SABC scandals going on still and people still talking about that. And in the same breath, DA, it could just still also be the conversations around the ad. So it might give an indication of what people felt with unrest.
And of course, the urban centers are always going to come up. I mean, I think of eThekwini as the proxy for Durban, the city of Cape Town, sort of bringing the Western Cape to the forefront. What are we seeing in terms of data points from there?
Yeah, so the city of Cape Town definitely brought the DA to the front in terms of being positive, but it's possibly just because they're the ruling party there, so people just support or don't support. And then eThekwini is showing almost the same as stats around the ANC and DA. And EFF as the others have. So overall, it's kind of looking the same for every metro.
And of course, it's always interesting to actually find out who are the noisiest in the group, right? And if you pull out the stats for that, what are we seeing here?
So what that shows you is when someone talks about the DA, when they support the DA, do they only say it once or do they say it more than once?
Right.
So you can see there that the DA supporters are noisy. They will go, in the past week, they won't just put out one tweet. On average, they'll put out 1.9, which is not a workable number, but I mean they'll put out 2 tweets when they're talking. So when they do get vocal, they do so more often than the EFF supporter would.
And that's interesting. So, I mean, if you're going to put out a couple of tweets, that's a measurement of noise intensity, if you will, and that kind of gives a sense of the extent to which you really want to engage on the issue. So you're coming at it at a number of angles because of the 140 character limitation, I suspect.
Yeah, so you kind of, what that's showing is almost the VIP speakers, the ones that want to get, you know, heard and they're putting out their opinion. And they want to show, you know, their feelings towards what they're talking about. I don't think the 140 characters has much to do with that. People will talk in short sentences, and there's very weird ways of speaking these days on these platforms. So they will work hard to get their message across because they feel strongly about it, I guess.
Melanie, it's interesting times to be alive in terms of just the way the political cycles run now. And it seems as if from the 2008 Obama presidential campaign, the world of politicking and electioneering has never been the same.
Definitely not. I always think that social media is a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And I think what politicians are, they're damned if they don't get involved on social platforms because it's bringing so much insights out that they should be listening to and working on. But they're damned if they do because they're opening themselves up to all the criticism and all the conversation. You'll see that most presidents have Twitter handles now. Most political parties have Facebook pages, Twitter handles. And yes, Obama definitely started it in 2008. The US being different, of course, once again, because of the lack of access to smartphones and cheap data in our country, where they're over there, they've got everything at their disposal to make these types of moves.
It's just really interesting wondering what the future of electioneering is going to look like. If it looks like now, what, in a couple of decades, how would the election cycle look? But unfortunately, we have to turn our attention now to the trend of the week. Very interesting insights around the key themes that have come out of the Twitter sphere and the conversations there. But let's have a quick look at the trend of the week. Euro 2016 dominating the conversations. I must say this doesn't feature in my world, but maybe in yours.
Definitely not in my personal world, but the France-Portugal game came up this week. Yeah. In a massive way.
And this is where Portugal won, right? I must make sure I get
that. I believe so, but listen, I'm also speaking under correction here. I'm an Afrikaans girl who didn't grow up with soccer.
So obviously dominating the world in terms of football lovers and the Portugal game being really big. But one that does matter to me and that I've followed quite closely, of course, is hashtag Black Lives Matter. Sure. And maybe just give us a sense of the genesis of that conversation and why it was so big.
It stood out this week because of two gentlemen being fatally shot by two officers in the US. And the conversation just spiraled from there, I guess. It's a hot topic. It is something, like you say, it's something that people care about. Obama's coming under fire for a lot of it. So it's definitely a...
Is it normal, Melanie, that you would get, a hashtag that would then emerge as almost as a fighting for space and voice? Because off the back of Black Lives Matter, then there was All Lives Matter. And that then, of course, erupted a whole lot of racial tension globally. But is it normal that we would see a competition for voice and a competition for space?
Well, if you think about it, Zuma Must Fall came from something. Fees Must Fall came from something.
Yeah.
It does tend to happen. It's definitely a trend where the one grows into the other. And if you think about the nature of a hashtag, that's what it's meant to do.
Yeah.
Is track, or group conversation together and let people converse around the same topic in the same space. So it definitely is a trend. It's definitely something that does happen.
And again, something that absolutely outside of my world. What on earth is this Pokemon Go that everybody is talking about?
Everybody's talking about it. It is, in my personal opinion, one of the most pointless games ever. But saying that, I have caught a few Pokemons myself. But I
guess, do you find them?
If you see people walking around with their phone in their hands doing this at stuff that's not there, ask one of them. And they're looking for Pokemons to catch. It's a massive explosion though in the app world. It's got usage over more than Twitter and WhatsApp. I read a stat today that people are spending 43 minutes on it per day. And the dangerous thing is they're in their cars half the time when they do this. So
no, it doesn't
it's an interesting
sound
one.
Melanie, thank you so much. Melanie Malherbe is the head of client engagement at Brandseye.